All right, everyone, buckle up. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and complex geopolitical stories unfolding right now, the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. You might be wondering, why Alaska? What's behind this meeting? And more importantly, what does it mean for the ongoing Ukraine conflict and the global power balance? In this video, we're not just skimming the surface. We're peeling back the layers to understand the motivations, risks, and implications for the ongoing summit, and strategies of two of the most powerful and unpredictable leaders on the world stage. From the historical significance of Alaska, to the chess match of military posturing, to the hard realities of international diplomacy, we're covering it all. So get ready for a full breakdown. Let's start with the place itself, Alaska. Back in 1867, the Russian Empire sold Alaska to the United States for $7.2 million. At the time, it was considered a controversial deal. Some called it Seward's folly, after the U.S. Secretary of State who orchestrated it. Why did Russia sell such a massive chunk of territory? The answer lies in history. Russia had just fought a brutal war, the Crimean War, which drained their treasury. The empire needed money and was worried about defending such a remote landmass. So they decided to cut their losses. Now fast forward over 150 years, and Alaska becomes the symbolic stage for a summit between Putin and Trump. Two leaders representing two nations with a long and fraught history. Choosing Alaska as the meeting point is no accident. It's a deliberate message, a subtle reminder of past conflicts and territorial changes, but also a signal of the power dynamics between the U.S. and Russia today. Many people question whether Putin's willingness to engage in peace talks is sincere or just a clever ploy. On one hand, Russia has suffered serious economic sanctions that have isolated it from many global markets. Its military has been stretched thin by the prolonged conflict in Ukraine, with reports of troop fatigue and equipment losses. From this angle, a ceasefire would buy Russia time to regroup and consolidate. But on the other hand, Putin's track record suggests he's not one to back down easily. Some analysts believe that Putin is using this pause to continue pushing for territorial gains, especially in eastern Ukraine and Crimea. He might agree to a temporary ceasefire, but in reality, his goal could be to drag the conflict out and chip away more territory piece by piece. So, how should the West respond? The consensus is clear. Any peace agreement must be backed by rock-solid enforcement mechanisms. No loopholes, no gentlemen's agreements. Because if Russia breaks the deal, NATO and the U.S. need to be ready to respond decisively with the full weight of military power, including nuclear deterrence if necessary. This is where the recent deployment of 2 American nuclear submarines near Russia comes in. It's a bold move. It's designed to send a clear message to Moscow. The U.S. and NATO are serious about defending Ukraine and maintaining peace through strength. These submarines aren't just symbols. They represent a strategic nuclear deterrent that could tip the scales if push comes to shove. This military posturing is coupled with diplomatic outreach. Trump's approach is to mix hard power with negotiation, showing strength while also opening channels for dialogue. It's classic diplomacy backed by muscle. Trump is known for his deal-making style. He doesn't just focus on one issue. He bundles multiple demands and concessions into a package that's hard to refuse. In the context of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, that means not only pushing for a ceasefire, but also exploring broader deals. For example, there's talk about involving Japan's Northern Territories dispute, where Russia holds islands claimed by Japan. Trump might propose trading territorial concessions in the North Pacific for cooperation on energy projects or mineral rights in Siberia. Such a deal would be complex, but could bring multiple parties to the table with incentives to cooperate. This big-picture strategy contrasts with more narrow Western approaches that focus strictly on Ukraine. Of course, Europe is deeply affected. Countries like Germany, France, and the UK have their own interests and challenges. For years, Germany has been accused of being too economically dependent on Russia, especially for energy. The war in Ukraine exposed the vulnerabilities of this approach. Now, these countries are being pushed to rebuild their military capabilities, a significant shift after decades of downsizing post-Cold War. The prospect of renewed militarization in Europe is daunting, but it may be necessary to deter further Russian aggression. NATO's credibility depends on its ability to protect member states and partners. If Russia tests the limits and breaks any agreements, NATO's response has to be swift and unified. History offers sobering lessons. Look at the post-World War II Yalta Conference, major powers carving up territories with little regard for local populations. Or the Cold War, which was marked by proxy conflicts, arms races, and decades of tension. More recently, the annexation of Crimea caught the West off guard. Appeasement or delayed responses only emboldened Russian moves. We've seen how underestimating a rival's intentions can lead to long-term instability. So any peace process must be grounded in realism and enforceability. Beyond the politics, there's the human element. Trump and Putin reportedly have a personal rapport. There are stories of Putin praying for Trump after assassination attempts, of Trump praising his phone calls with Putin. While personal chemistry doesn't guarantee successful diplomacy, it can create channels for communication that others lack. If Trump leverages this relationship wisely, it could open doors to breakthroughs. But it's a delicate balance. Neither side wants to appear weak or concede too much. We can't ignore the global backdrop. China watches closely. According to reports, China fears a Russia-Ukraine peace deal because it could free the U.S. to focus more on countering China in the Asia-Pacific region. For China, a prolonged conflict diverts U.S. attention and resources away. This adds another layer of complexity to the geopolitical game. Moreover, Trump's tariffs and trade negotiations with China play into the larger strategy of balancing great powers. Plenty. If the peace talks collapse, or if Russia uses the truce to rearm and strike later, we risk an even bloodier conflict. Political changes in the US or Europe could also shift the calculus. For instance, a new administration less willing to stand firm might embolden Moscow. The stakes are enormous, and mistakes could be catastrophic. If the summit leads to a lasting ceasefire and a detailed, enforceable agreement, it could stabilize Eastern Europe and reduce the threat of wider war. It could set the stage for cooperative energy projects, economic recovery, and even a redefinition of the post-Cold War order. It would be a win for diplomacy backed by credible strength. The Alaska summit isn't just about Trump and Putin shaking hands. It's about two global powers wrestling with history, strategy, and the future. It's about balancing hard power and diplomacy, old grudges and new realities. As this story continues to unfold, one thing is clear. The decisions made here will echo far beyond Alaska's icy shores. If you want to keep up with these complex stories and get straight, no-fluff analysis, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and drop your thoughts in the comments. What's your take on this high-stakes summit? Could peace really be on the horizon? Or is this just another chapter in a long saga? Let's discuss.